Hello and welcome to Bunny Hop. My name is George Weedman and I have with me Steve Gaynor.
Hey.
And for you, it's been a hell of a year. Like I remember last year when I was at GDC, I saw Gone Home in the IGF booth and I didn't expect it to blow up like this. Like very positive reviews. You've gotten awards. You just came back from the BAFTA and countless other kinds of accolades. Did you guys expect it to be as successful as it was?
I don't think you can predict that kind of thing. I mean, maybe somebody can. Maybe somebody's like, all right, here's the awards we're gonna win, let's do this thing. But I mean, for us, it was much more like, we thought we'd made a game that was pretty good. Like, we liked it, so that was a good sign. But, we didn't even know if that many people were really gonna, like, connect with it. Because it's like it's a game where you have to get into the story and kind of be there for what it does, because it's a very focused game. It's a small game, and so we didn't know if that many people were going to be psyched about it. But we've been really grateful to see that it's gone over well with a bunch of folks.
Do you think it has kind of a limited appeal?
I guess all I mean is there are a lot of games you play where if you don't like one part of it, you can still enjoy the game because you like the other part of it. It's like, oh, well, I don't really like the missions, but I like the open world stuff. Or, the story's not that good, but the platforming's really good or something. And in Gone Home, it's really just sort of like you either like exploring and finding the story or there's nothing else in the game. So, it's the kind of thing where if it doesn't click for you, then it's not your thing. But, and so we didn't know where that was going to go. But luckily, a lot of people, have been into it.
And that kind of environmental storytelling has also worked out for the BioShock games, which you guys worked on. You made the DLC for BioShock 2 Minerva's Den.
Yeah.
How did you use the experience from the DLC in the design and development of Gone Home?
The great thing about that experience, we worked on the main game of BioShock 2 together, and I was a level designer on BioShock Infinite for a year. So we spent a lot of time in that kind of design approach, that design philosophy. And we used a lot of the same techniques, like level design-wise and storytelling-wise, as are used in BioShock, of having levels that are fairly open to explore, non-linearly, but that have this linear story kind of threaded through them with audio diaries and environmental storytelling. And we just took that as our starting point and said, if that's going to be the whole game, what else do we need to add? You can examine objects and read things and also find this kind of string of these spoken messages as you are guided, hopefully fairly invisibly by the level design to kind of find stuff in the right order without feeling like you're being led along.
There are also keys and trapdoors that you encounter in kind of a linear order if you do end up following cues in a very specific way.
Yeah.
The thing that Gone Home does differently from pretty much every other game, and especially BioShock, is that the characters are ordinary people.
Sure, yeah.
And I was wondering, what are some of the challenges for writing characters that are comparatively, literally realistic? That's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but in Gone Home, the characters are realistic. What are some of the challenges of writing people who might not have what traditional video games consider interesting problems or adventures to go on?
I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, it's easier in some ways, because part of the challenge when you're writing characters, like when I was writing, Porter for Minerva's Den, it's you have to balance them being a believable individual that you could actually meet, and you're like, oh yeah, I understand what this guy is about, with him talking about you have to hack that security turret, and it's sort of those two things are actually sometimes harder to balance than when you do have the freedom to say okay, there's no combat in this game, there's no crazy puzzles, you have to explain why this crazy puzzle is here.
You find it comes more naturally to write realistic characters.
In a way, it allows you just to focus on who they are and not well, who are they and why are they fighting all these zombies or something, And that said, it's still a challenge to say, well, why is this individual's story interesting? Because it's not interesting because it's a life or death struggle against, an evil force. You have to figure out, well, why is their personal story that could have happened to anyone interesting enough for the player to want to keep playing and find more and see how it ends?
And that's the thing. This is something that could literally happen to just anyone. And the way I read the game was the ultimate payoff was the realization that these were normal people. And there were a lot of what I interpreted to be kind of horror game cues and tropes, kind of making a smokescreen for the grand reveal at the end, a supposed shocking plot twist, which was that there was not much of a shocking plot twist.
Right.
Like the most, I guess, thing that I guess would be shocking is that Sam, one of the main characters, is gay, but realizing that that would be shocking was more of a shock than the actual plot point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, expected the ending to be more dark or grim, and something that I thought was interesting to explore, was that we knew we were making a game that aside from just being about normal people, just took place in the real world, like in our world we actually live in, one-to-one. Like we couldn't put like copyrighted brand names on stuff. But aside from that, it's like
it's very clear what the Super Nintendo games are supposed to be too. So.
Right. But it's like, it's just a family's house. And when you're playing a video game, there's no reason that has to be true, right? You play the game, you assume, well, there might as well be ghosts here or something, right? Because it's all this created world.
There are little hints that keep you guessing up until the very end, for me at least, when I was playing through it.
Yeah, and so I thought it was interesting to like play with those assumptions and kind of acknowledge, like, you get into this thing, you start playing this game, you don't know what the rules of the world are, and you encounter very few games, I think, where the rules are essentially the same as your everyday life as far as what's real. Ghosts aren't real in the game, just like they're not real in our own everyday lives. But to know that people, there's no reason for them to assume that's true, and to kind of use those tropes and like the red stains on the tub and stuff to say like, okay, I know what you're expecting.
There's a Ouija board, and there's these secret nooks and crannies.
Yeah, and it's like we're gonna acknowledge the assumptions by like putting that on screen, and then every time we do that, subvert it by saying like, no, really, it's just a normal family. So hopefully by the end, you're invested in finding out about the characters and not like, so when's the ghost finally going to show up, And
I guess the closest thing to a main character in the plot is Sam herself. Why did you choose that her problem, like the conflict causing the plot to go forward, would be her sexuality? Of all the other problems that normal people can face in life, why was it sexual self-discovery?
Well, I mean, part of it was, when we decided this game was just going to be set in a family's house, we were like, okay, who's the family? We want multiple generations, and if the story is going to be all set inside this house, the drama has to come from a conflict within the family, And so we were thinking like, there's some kind of conflict between the parents and the kids or kid or what, and we're like, okay, there's a teenager. And when you're a teenager, you're going through all of that stuff, no matter who you are as an individual. And we're thinking of just classic examples like Romeo and Juliet. It's like, okay, the kid falls in love with somebody that their parents don't approve of, but Montagues and Capulets are not like the thing that's really the going concern in 2013. When we were going to release the game, so we were like, okay, well, if she fell in love with another girl, that's totally a thing where the parents could not understand. There could be all of this, that could be the driver of, she assumes that she has to keep this secret because she doesn't know how people are going to react. And we wanted to explore the implications of, not just like the universal events of like falling in love for the first time, but also, this additional layer of having to navigate, the expectation of society and your family and hiding all of this stuff about yourself, and just look at how that would affect Sam as an individual through the story.
So, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very clever and well done. I reacted very positively, and you see a lot of positive reaction from people in the industry. And between all the high scores that your game has gotten, all the reviews and stuff, you're probably going to be all over the IGS tonight, which is going to be interesting to see. But it's more divisive online, and I would totally understand that you don't see a lot of these discussions, but there's some people on the internet who can't stand Gone Home, and I was wondering if you thought the game was going to be as controversial as it turned out to be.
I didn't think that. It was more, like I was saying initially, it was like, okay, we assumed there'd be some people that were into it, and some people it's just like, okay, well, that's not my thing, and I'm not into that. But going the next step of like, well, that's not my thing, and actually it's the worst thing ever and shouldn't exist, was not something that we anticipated. But I think that it's part of. I think that the strong positive reaction from people that were really excited about it drove the backlash from the other side, where it's not like this isn't just my thing, but all these people are saying it's like really good, and
it was a big topic, so it got a big reaction from both sides of the debate.
And it's like that's the internet, whatever. It's I don't I can't identify with it. It's like when I don't like something, I just kind of am
totally
like
understandable since you created the thing.
Well, I mean, in general, just the approach of like if there's something that I play or movie or something that I don't like, it's like okay, well I don't like it. That's not for me. So it's a little weird to see like a really kind of vitriolic response to it. But at the end of the day, you can't please everybody, and we've had at least as enthusiastic a positive response on the other side. So, we'll be okay.
And again, I hate to dwell on this topic yet again, but what do you have to say for the claim that a lot of people are making that Gone Home is not a game?
Well, when's this going up?
Hopefully tomorrow morning.
Okay, well that'll be right around when I'm giving a talk called "Why Is Gone Home a Game?"
And I love the title.
I think there are certain expectations that you have when you're looking at just a modern mainstream video game that'll have these certain things, and Gone Home doesn't have a lot of those things. It's a small, very focused experience. It's not like you're going to be making story decisions that branch the story, or you aren't going to have dozens of hours of gameplay or anything. But the other side of it is, I think that the only reason that Gone Home has any meaning to it is because it is a game, because it's an interactive thing that you don't just kind of click through, but you are an active participant. You're someone who is exploring this house and deciding how to approach it and what to imbue meaning with by engaging with it. And you're making all of these connections as you go along, that kind of take place not on the screen, but between you and the screen. You're kind of drawing out the threads of the story as you play through. And I think that the fact that every player's experience of the game is unique to how they decide to play through it is what gives it value, as opposed to just, okay, here's the text dump, just read the story. The feeling of being in the house and being the one who's deciding how to discover this stuff and what it means to you, I think is where the value in it lies.
And I think you helped connect sort of with players by using nostalgia and stuff. For me in particular, even though I wasn't, a girl in the 90s dealing with sexuality issues, it still brought me back. It still reminded me of my own childhood and my own teenage years. And I was wondering how accommodating do you think it is for other players who might not necessarily experience growing up in the 90s or with any kind of an interesting sexual history of their own?
I mean, for one, I think that it's always interesting to see stuff that takes place in a very specific time that you didn't personally live through. And I think the closest analog is I've watched, Freaks and Geeks, and it's about being a teenager and going through all of these, issues of friendship and kind of finding your place in this, society and cliques and all the stuff that is familiar to anyone who's been through high school, but it takes place in 1981 or whatever, and it's I wasn't in high school then.
And that kind of affords it a bit of romanticism too.
I think so, and it's you didn't have to live through it to be able to kind of internalize what all the specifics meant to these characters, but probably if you were in high school at that time, they have some additional meaning because you remember oh yeah, everybody was listening to that album that summer or whatever, right? But I think that, as someone who is more of an observer as opposed to someone who can also share those memories, it's an equally interesting thing to kind of see from the outside. I mean, I love old films. I love watching, film noir from the 50s, and just seeing how everyday life was different at other times is cool. And as far as just like who Sam is as an individual and what she's gone through, we've been really happy to see responses from players that very much have those specific parallels in their life, but also people who have written in to us specifically and been like, I'm a 38-year-old straight guy from Wisconsin, and like I played this game, but it reminded me of like when I first fell in love with the woman who I'm now married to, or like people saying like my life wasn't anything like Sam's, but this part or that part, or like I really identified with what the dad went through, or whatever. Being able to see themselves in different parts of the game has been really cool.
Okay. Well, yeah, cool. I think I got to thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for the game. I, for whatever it's worth, thought it was inspiring and great. And I wish you the best of luck at the awards show tonight. And have a good conference.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me on.
Thank you.